War is terrifying, but some things go far beyond bullets and bombs. In this countdown, we'll uncover 10 horrifying things soldiers actually faced during World War I, ranked from the least to the most terrifying. Stay until the end, because the final one will leave you speechless. Number 10. Most people imagine the battlefield filled with gunfire and explosions. But for many soldiers, one of the most chilling sights came in the silence after the fighting had stopped. As night fell, the dead were left scattered across the mud. But something else moved in the darkness. Packs of wild animals. Wolves, stray dogs, and even hyenas on the Eastern Front emerged from the shadows, drawn by the overwhelming scent of blood and decay. Soldiers told of hearing low growls at night, and waking to find mutilated bodies, sometimes missing entire limbs. In some cases, the wounded, too weak to move, became prey. One survivor wrote in his diary, "They weren't afraid of us. They circled, they waited. One man screamed, then went silent." War may have made men into monsters, but out there, in the dark, real monsters were waiting too. Number 9. If the wolves hunted above ground, something even more disturbing thrived below. The trenches of World War I were not only filled with mud and blood, but with rats. Not the kind you see in cities. These were monstrous. Fed by the endless corpses, some grew as large as cats. And they weren't afraid of humans. Soldiers told of rats crawling over their sleeping bodies, sometimes nibbling at open wounds. Some claimed they watched rats chew through uniforms and into the flesh beneath. Others described entire nests inside abandoned helmets, feeding on whatever remains they could find. One chilling account described a rat gnawing at the face of a fallen comrade, as if testing whether he was still alive. You could fight an enemy with a gun, but how do you fight something that comes at night, silent, hungry, and unstoppable? Number 8. Not all battles were fought on the surface. Beneath the earth, a hidden war raged, one of picks, dynamite, and death. Soldiers dug tunnels beneath enemy lines to plant explosives or spy. These narrow shafts, carved through unstable ground, were often dark, airless, and suffocating. But the real terror came when the earth gave way. Entire squads were buried alive as tunnels collapsed. No screams could be heard. No rescues were possible. They died slowly, in silence, in total darkness. Decades later, some of these lost tunnels were unearthed. Inside, search teams found skeletons, some still clutching each other, helmets fused to the skull, weapons at the ready, as if still waiting for a final command that would never come. To be forgotten by the war, swallowed by the earth, was perhaps the cruelest fate of all. Number 7. There were missions that no one returned from. Orders whispered at night, no questions asked, no names remembered, just silence, and a final march into hell. These were the so-called suicide squads. Soldiers chosen, sometimes forced, to carry out impossible tasks, charging machine guns, retrieving the wounded under open fire, laying explosives beneath enemy trenches. Survivors from nearby units reported seeing men moving like ghosts, their eyes hollow, their movements mechanical. Some were given alcohol or morphine to numb the fear. Others were threatened with execution if they refused. And when they didn't return, they weren't always counted. One soldier wrote, "They didn't speak, just walked into the mist, like they knew death was already waiting." These men weren't just lost to war, they were erased by it. Number 6. The battlefield left more than scars on the body. It shattered minds. Back then, they called it shell shock. Today we know it as PTSD. But in World War I, no one understood what was happening. Soldiers who once stood strong returned home silent, trembling, unable to speak, or screaming at nothing. Some were paralyzed without injury. Others stared into space, endlessly rocking, haunted by things only they could see. Commanders believed they were cowards. Many were punished, even executed. But what they really were broken. One medic wrote, You could see the war still playing in their eyes, over and over, and they couldn't stop it. The bullets ended battles, but for some, the war never ended. It just moved inside. Number 5. War is chaos. But sometimes, it became something far more grotesque, something unimaginable. The artillery in World War I was monstrous, capable of shattering trenches, leveling forests, and unearthing the dead. After some bombardments, the air turned thick with smoke and dust, and then it began to fall. Not rain, not debris, but pieces of bodies, arms, legs, skulls, flesh flung into the air by the explosions, raining down on survivors below. Soldiers described standing still, paralyzed, as a severed hand landed beside them, or a face unrecognizable tumbled from the sky. One survivor wrote, "You couldn't tell if it was friend or enemy, just parts dropping like hail. No place felt safe, not even the sky above." Number 4. It began as whispers, then screams in the night, then silence. In the winter of 1917, near the Eastern Front, soldiers started reporting strange mutilations, bodies torn open, not by bullets, not by blades, but by claws, deep gashes, crushed bone, faces twisted in terror. Some said they saw eyes glowing in the darkness just beyond the wire. Others swore they heard low growls, too deep to be human. At first, commanders blamed wild animals, but the wounds didn't match, and the attacks always came when visibility was low, during fog, storms, or moonless nights. One journal entry now lost reportedly read, "We fired. It didn't run, it stood tall and stared, like it understood." Was it a legend born from trauma and fear? Or something far older, stalking the edges of war? Some say it was a curse, others an experiment. But in those trenches, something was hunting them. Number 3. There were places on the front where the air changed, where even seasoned soldiers refused to go. They called it the fog. But this fog wasn't natural. Reports came from both sides. Sudden banks of mist rolling across no man's land, thick as smoke, cold as ice, silent as death. Within it, soldiers reported hearing voices. Sometimes their own names whispered back at them. Some described glowing lights, blue, green, or red, floating just above the ground. And then, people began to disappear. One patrol walked into the fog and never returned. Another came back days later, their minds broken, unable to speak. A French officer wrote, "It was not weather, it was alive, watching." Scientists later blamed hallucinations, gas leaks, or trauma. But the men who saw it never forgot, because in the fog, the war wasn't the only thing waiting. Number 2. It came without warning. A soft hiss, a yellow cloud creeping low across the battlefield, and then the screams. Poison gas was one of the most feared weapons of World War I. Chlorine, phosgene, and the infamous mustard gas didn't just kill, they mutilated. The gas ate through lungs, eyes, and skin. Soldiers tore at their uniforms, clawing their faces, coughing blood, screaming as their throats burned from the inside out. Some were blinded instantly, others collapsed, suffocating slowly over hours. Those who survived were often left scarred, their faces melted, their bodies disfigured for life. One medic described it as watching a man drown on dry land. Gas masks helped, but not always. A broken seal, a missed alarm, and it was over. For many, it wasn't death that was terrifying. It was what came before it. From giant rats and wild beasts to men buried alive beneath the earth, we've seen soldiers haunted by invisible fog, hunted by things that shouldn't exist, and torn apart by weapons no human should ever face. We've crossed darkness, death, and legend. But what comes next isn't a myth. It's a mystery so disturbing, so unexplained, that it remains unsolved to this day. This is number 1. Number 1. In 1915, during the Gallipoli campaign, over 260 men from the British 5th Norfolk Battalion marched into a valley and never returned. Witnesses from nearby units claimed to see a strange, low-hanging fog descend over the area just after the battalion entered. According to one New Zealand observer, the mist swallowed the entire formation and then slowly lifted, but the soldiers were gone. No gunfire, no bodies, no trace. Search parties were sent immediately. They found nothing, not a boot, not a rifle, not a drop of blood. It was as if the battalion had evaporated from time itself. For decades, families waited for answers. Rumors ranged from mass capture to desertion to something far stranger. Even now, over a century later, the fate of those men remains a chilling mystery. In a war full of horror, this was perhaps the most terrifying thing of all. They didn't die. They disappeared.